Will you please welcome up onto the stage Mr. Gregor Townsend, MBE. It's great to know that things never change. When I came in the door, we were pretty much first here just to get the lay of the land, and a Gala committee man who is a legend down here, known for not spending his money, said to me as I walked in with the book under my arm, he said, have you read the book? I said, aye. He says, tell us all about it, I'll see if he's buying it. That was the same committee man that when Gala used to play Cardiff all those years ago, and on the Monday night the Cardiff game was cancelled, and I remember us in the changing room, and this gentleman and Billy Eason, God rest his soul, came into the changing room and said, lads, I'm sorry to say the Cardiff game's been cancelled, but we've got 2 games lined up. We can either play Neath, who were a set of psychopathic miners with skinheads in the 1980s, your Kevin Phillips and your Brian Williams and the Pugh brothers, possibly one of the hardest club sides in Europe in the 80s, or Merthyr Tydfil, who were division number 17, would have taken about 150 points off them up the valleys. It would have been great. So on Thursday he comes in, Billy says, right lads, we've made a decision, we're playing Neath. And all the boys went, oh. I said, Billy, how did you come to that decision? He said, I phoned both the clubs and found out that a pint at Neath was 2 pence cheaper. Anyway, it's a great occasion, and it's a beautiful day outside. The field's looking great, and it could only really start off in one place, that Gregor launches his book. And I think in some ways I'm going to ask you first and foremost, Gregor, and I've read the book. It took me about 3.5 months, and Mark Ballantyne helped me with coloured in the middle pages. But no, it's a great book, and first and foremost, it must be great to have something like this. If anybody ever asks, what did Gregor Townsend do in rugby? Read the book.
No, it was. It probably took me a year longer than I expected to write it. But I just want to say thanks for everyone for turning up today. It's a fantastic effort from you all. It reminds me a bit more like my wedding day, seeing all these people here today that I've not seen for a while, but my bride isn't the best looking, I have to say. Now, going back to the book, I think it's been something I've wanted to write about, especially the Matt Williams episode where he kicked me out of the Scotland team, and I didn't want to tell anybody about that at the time. I was upset, but I was also a bit embarrassed by it, the fact that I'd been booted out. So that gave me the motivation then to write a book and tell everyone what happened, and also the negativity that's been going on with the borders closing, to have something positive at the end, something that you finish your career. It's not such a blow that you know you're not going to play rugby again. You've done something. You've kept it quite kind of non-political. Was that on purpose? Yeah, well, it's funny because I thought it was serialised in the Scotland on Sunday, and I thought they definitely used in my last chapter where I detail what went on with the borders and the closing, and I was obviously against it, and I put ideas forward where we could have saved the borders or what we could do for Scottish rugby. I didn't want to be controversial and have a go at certain individuals, but I thought it would be quite controversial just detailing what went on, because what went on was a scandal over the last couple of years. And so in many ways it's not political in that I don't pick sides, but what they've done to borders rugby, but a lot of the decisions over the last few years for Scottish rugby have been poor. So I didn't shy away from controversy, I suppose. OK, well, the way we're going to work it this afternoon, folks, we'll have a good 25 minutes pretty much talking about the book and ripping your life to bits. And then after that, we can do a walk with a mic, so if anybody's got any questions that they want to ask the man... Apart from that table over there. Apart from that table, yeah. There's too many skeletons across there. And let's face it, they've all put a fair bit of weight on them now as well. But I think first and foremost, let's start off, because it's a great starting part of your book on when you first played in Netherdale. It was, yes. I had to persuade my mum and dad that I was able to play at Netherdale. I was 7 years old, and my brother had came home to say that someone had called off his under-10 team to play in the ward sports, and they wouldn't have a team. And 4 of the guys here today that played in that game back in 1980 it would have been. So it's great to see you here, boys. And I said to mum and dad, oh, please, can I play? I'd never played a game of rugby before in my life. 2 years younger than my brother and all his friends. So after crying a lot, they relented, and I played out there, and we won the tournament. I got 2 passes the whole day, and I think I dropped them both times. But no, it was obviously that started my career, and to finish against the Ospreys in May on the same pitch, it was a nice sort of bookending, as they call it, to my career.
We'll come back to that in a minute, but Gala and the town and the whole culture of the place, how would you say that it kind of moulded and shaped you for all the the pressures and hassles that you've had through your rugby playing life?
Yeah, well, that 1980, the 80s, obviously, I think the 70s and 80s were the golden age of borders rugby. I mentioned in the book that when I was born in 1973, that was the first year of the official leagues in Scotland. And between then and when I made my debut for Gala in 1990, only one non-borders team won a championship in that time. So I was fortunate enough to be brought up through the 84 Grand Slam, the 90 Grand Slam, and there was borders players at the heart of that, Gala players at the heart of that. So what a place to play rugby when you know you've got internationals there and a real high quality game, and it's part of our culture. It still is, but probably to a lesser extent. So no, I was always encouraged by my mum and dad to do what I wanted to do. I played a lot of football. I was just chatting there with Rob Moffat that at primary school we never really got the chance to play rugby. We didn't have games like they have now. We
did it at Langley, but it wasn't a rugby. It's just kicking the shit out of each other for a laugh.
So I didn't have the games, a competitive outlet, so that's why I played football. But I came into rugby, and it was a great place to play rugby, obviously. Your
first game against Stirling County, I can remember it because I was in the team. And
was that your one game for Gala?
That was the one game, aye. It's the one I like to keep going on about quite a bit. But to come into that position of standoff, there was a kind of, I don't know what it is, there was huge pressure on that position in this town. You had some legendary players there in the past. Hovis had played there, Colin Gass had played there, Jim Maitlands were all there. There was always huge pressure on that 10 position, and Gala used to always bring in quite a lot of young players in there. Was there pressure on you?
Yeah, there was some pressure. It was the October school holidays, and I was my last year at school, and I think, was it Duncan Cameron?
Duncan Cameron, yeah.
Duncan Cameron got injured.
Ex-Melrose.
Ex-Melrose. Aren't we all?
I was trying to keep away from that.
And I think they approached Rob, or my dad was actually one of the selectors, so that's probably why I got picked ahead of David Chang Ling, and they said, would you be available? It's October holidays, you won't be playing school games. And I said, yeah, would Stirling, then Melrose. And I remember the game was pouring the rain. Yeah. Stirling won the championship that year as well, so they were a good side. And I always felt I got better at the next level I played against, and it was an okay game. We probably should have won. I think our goal kicker Peter Dodds missed some kicks that day, but I always thought at the time it was great to be in a side that were taking it so serious. After the game, all these players were saying we'll get revenge against these Stirling guys. They were singing in the changing rooms, and he said everybody was up for the next week's game against Melrose. Where at school and Wanderers, it was competitive, but it wasn't that serious. So I enjoyed that side of it. Unfortunately, the next week I was picked against Craig Chalmers at Melrose down at the Green Yards. Was Jim Telford the coach at the time? He might have been, and we beat them. We beat them by a point. So
you are but seconds from greatness.
Greg Crosby was playing. We were just youngsters there. I was 17, he was 18, so it was a great experience. But the week later, I was back at school playing for the school level. And looking back, maybe I should have kept on because I did pick up some bad habits playing for the school level. But I enjoyed my last year at school.
But before that, obviously, you had the Wanderers there. Great times there. And there's a number of the boys sitting at the table today, and some great stories as well.
Yes, we had a couple of good coaches there. Your dad, I have to say, excellent coach, and Hovis Brown. And we won the Scottish Youth title in 1990 or 1991, and it was just it was a great environment to play in. You had these two Gala legends, Johnny who'd coached the South, beating the Wallabies, Hovis who'd played for Scotland, and their crack was superb, and we gave them such a hard time. The nights, I don't know if people all remember the hut over there where we used to change and play, and there was the thinnest walls ever, and one night I remember we went down to training, and there was only 4 or 5 of us turned up because it had been snowing, and Johnny, no, even though it's snowing, we'll have to go out and train. So we sneaked out early when he was still preparing the session, and we built a snowman, and when Johnny and Hovis came out, we pelted them with snowballs, and that sort of put them off training us, but it worked well because we won the championship that year.
Great tactics. On to Gala, and then after that, obviously, we can't go any further in the conversation without mentioning possibly a club and an experience that had a huge part to play in what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Was your first, obviously, trip out to Australia?
I had the chance to go out there in 1992 to stay on after the Scotland tour to play for a club in Sydney called Warringah, and I couldn't play then because I had the Students' World Cup, but I was determined to go back out the next year. I'd enjoyed the tour in Australia, and I thought playing under new coaches and a new environment could only improve my game. So I went out there to play 3 months. I had a roommate from Kelso, the most untidy roommate I've ever met, called Stuart Bennett, who's here today. We didn't share a bed, but we shared a room. And his half of the room was a pigsty. He was a farmer, and I always remember at night cockroaches going about. He said, "Oh, don't worry, cockroaches are fine, but I had to kill them before I went to sleep." But it was a great time to play in Australian rugby. They were the world champions in '91. I think my first game was against Nick Farr-Jones. 2 games later, playing against Campese. Rugby was amateur, so you're playing against the best players in the world, and it was a type of rugby we weren't used to over here. It was fast paced. They didn't encourage kicking at all, so that suited me because I couldn't kick. And throughout all my career, that's the fastest I've ever improved. Maybe because I was in a different environment, but the skills I had to learn in terms of passing and attacking the gain line, that's what made me play flatter. Before then, I was quite deep, like any standoff in the Northern Hemisphere. But I played against Randwick one day. I played against this guy called Lloyd Walker, who was a big, fat Aborigine guy. And I saw him turn up before the game, and I thought, I fancy my chances here. Mid-30s. He had played for Australia, but he can't be very fast. But I couldn't lay a finger on him. He was so close to the gain line. He was putting little wrist passes in, and you either let him run because you think he's not going to run far, and he's in behind you causing damage, and then you go and trying to tackle him, he puts someone through a hole. So I learned a lot that day, and it's amazing right throughout my career, the games that you learn more than one game than you do in a whole season. And that's why I was a bit disappointed that Scotland didn't put their full team out against New Zealand, because the 2 or 3 times I played against Andrew Mertens, what I learned in those 80 minutes had been more than I'd learned in the 2 years before, what he did under pressure, how he held his hands. So it is always best. It's always the best way to learn is playing against the best in the world.
Do you think you've been a player that, when you look at the experiences you've had up into Australia, were you easy to coach when you came back? Do you feel you're a player that's always had a way of, you think this is the game and this is the way it should be played, this suits me? Or, you've had a fair amount of slack in the press over the years. There'll be not any other player, I wouldn't think, in Scotland that's taken the criticism and also had the pat in the backs that you've had. It's been a real roller coaster for you. It
has. I would like to think I'd be easy to coach because I didn't have a set way of playing. I always thought the way to get better is improve and learn, and have you training sessions as important as games, and you learn so much. I think it'd be very frustrating to coach. Easy to coach in that I could be told something to do, but there'd be times I'd be very frustrated, and obviously Rob and Jim are there who'd coach me, and I'd maybe, especially in my career, try and force things and try and do things that I thought that was on that maybe my teammates didn't think was on. So in many ways I'd be hard to coach during the games because I'd be still making my own decisions, which I do think is the best way of doing it. But I was never a guy that said, no, I'm playing this sort of way. No, yeah. I would always try and think what to help work with the coaches. I had a way of thinking that was the best way of playing. I thought playing closer to the advantage line was the best way of playing, and now everyone plays close to the advantage line, so hopefully I've been proved right.
Would you like to be 21, 22 again? Start all over again? With the way the game's
No, not because the game's professional. I was very lucky. 21, 22, I was playing amateur rugby, and we played it because we loved the sport and all the stuff that goes around rugby, the touring, the crack, the aftermatch. It's went away from the game now. You still get some good aftermatch, and the changing room chat is the same as it ever was, but the rest of it is more, I wouldn't say it's more intense, but you get more introverted players because they're scared to say what they think in case the coach doesn't like it. You might not get a contract at the end of the year. People are scared to speak to the press. So no, we were not. I started in an era where there was much more visible characters, guys like JJ and the Hastings brothers who are big characters. Now I think there's less characters because the game is so judgmental. Yep. So no, I know I'm fortunate that I played half my career amateur and then half the career when I was getting paid and been able to do it every day.
Funny stories, there's hundreds of them, isn't there? And we could maybe bring in a couple now, but there was always the one you told me about your first, obviously, Scottish international experience when you were taken away for a kind of pre-match ritual.
That's true. I was 18-year-old. I was selected to play for Scotland B, and it was the youngest ever player to play for Scotland B. And we were staying in the Balmoral Hotel, and this was amazing to me. I'd been staying in halls of residence at Edinburgh Uni, and my room, I always remember my room, it was called G1, which is ground floor number 1. It was right beside the main entrance, and every Saturday night someone would knock on the window at 3 a.m. I forgot my keys, can you open up? And it wasn't a very good place to stay. So this Balmoral Hotel was fantastic. Night before a game at Murrayfield against Ireland B. And I was hanging around with more of the Borders players. Some of them are here today, but they'll remain nameless. Apart from Gary Isaacs, because I mentioned that in the book. He said to me, we'll always go for a walk before an international. Are you coming along? I said, yeah, it sounds great. We'll be bored in the hotel. So I went out of the Balmoral Hotel, down Princes Street Gardens, up, round about the Grass Market. So we'd walked about 10, 15 minutes. And someone shouted, we're just going to stop for a lemonade, Gregor. Do you fancy coming in? It'll break up the journey. I said, yeah, that sounds good. I was going along with everyone else. And I thought they were walking a bit faster to this pub. I don't know if you know the Grass Market. At the end of the Grass Market, there's these 3 pubs. One of them's called the Buck and Hare.
No. I haven't a clue what you're talking about there.
They have dancing ladies in this pub. So in we walk, strip bar. I didn't realise it was a strip bar. And then we'll have a couple of, just lemonades, just to obviously relax before the big game. And just before we're about to leave, the door opens, and it was like being in a Wild West. Doors swing open. In walks 3 of the Scotland management. And we're a bit worried, I better not swear. Mum and Dad are here. We're very worried. The Scotland management obviously found out that we were in a strip bar the night before the game. My first ever game for Scotland. I thought, that's my Scotland career finished. But it turned out that they looked as worried as us. we had caught them the night out. So we quickly finished our drinks and left, and it was never mentioned again.
They were maybe coming to dance. Obviously on to Northampton, and that was the first, it completely changed your career down there. Good times, bad times?
Yeah, well, there was good times and bad times. When I went to Northampton, the game was still amateur, so I went to ostensibly to work in London, worked for the Royal Bank, and I went down on a train every morning at 7:30, trained twice a week, and that's what we thought the game would be. We never thought we'd become suddenly professional. But 9 months later, in 1995, the game goes professional, and suddenly you're getting paid to play. So it was a great experience. Northampton were, this word professional gets used a lot, but they were a professional club before their time. Ian McGeechan was full-time director of rugby with 6,000-7,000 every game. The only negative, which turned out to be a positive, is that we were in Division 2, but we played fantastic rugby. That year coincided with Scotland going for a Grand Slam game, and I played standoff, so it was probably my best season to date. And it was a confidence I got playing at Northampton. But there were bad times. My last season there, I have to admit, I was close to signing for either Cardiff or Bath because I'd played for the Lions at standoff, but I was still playing centre for Northampton. So I thought, to take the destiny in my own hands, I have to move club. I ended up staying on, didn't play that great, and got a bit of stick from the crowd because I decided to move to France halfway during that season. But mostly good memories.
Yeah. France, obviously, I enjoyed the whole French thing in the book because it's just so different. And, the coaches across there, just a completely different psyche altogether, i.e. psychopathic. Mm-hmm. Some great stories.
There are. We had a coach at Brive. Brive were European champions a year and a half before I joined. And they just lost the final 3-4 months before I joined to Bath, so they could have been double European champions. I thought, I'm joining the club here. Philippe Carbonneau, Christophe Lamaison, David Venditti, who else? Lisandro Arbizu, Olivier Campan, internationalists in that backline. Sébastien Carat, who'd won a bronze medal for the French relay team in the 100 metres, ran 110.3. Just what a backline. And then I found out there was just this nutter coaching and mental approach to the game. But I only found out at my first home game where I played a couple of away games. Everything was fine. We played the Champagne Rugby in France. And then first home game, it just turned into the scariest thing I've ever seen. The coach, Laurent Seigneur, ex-prop for France, starts walking around the changing room, picking anyone he sees, grabbing their T-shirt, having a fight, sticking the head on a couple of the guys. It was mainly on the forwards, so I thought, this is all right. This is what French forwards do. And we got away from it. I just stuck with the backs. And then 2 games later, he calls, the backs are out warming up. He says, Greg, Lisandro, you're coming with the forwards. I went, oh no, what's he got in mind? He said, both of you on the floor. I want the centres to be as hard as the forwards on the floor for the warm-up. We go, what's happening here? And he said, right, for the next 5 minutes, I want the forwards to run over the top of these two guys to harden them up. I thought, what is this? Is very strange. And some of the forwards would be nice to us. They were stepping over us. They weren't standing us. He would come in and go, no, this is what the backs have to do as well. 2 weeks after that, again, I got involved with Lawrence Senior. He said, before we go out, we're going to do a tackle practice. Everyone get a partner. And I'd been injured. I'd injured my shoulder. So I said, wait till I get my shoulder pads on. So I got my shoulder pads on, got my jersey back on, and there was no partner apart from my coach who was staring at me.
Brilliant.
Oh, and I was absolutely crapping myself. All the other players were doing sort of the technique, running and lifting yourself out, and it wasn't that hard. And he'd went to the other end of the changing room, a big 18-stone prop, and charged at me like this. Fortunately, first time in my life, I managed to get a decent tackle and lifted him off the ground, and he was my best mate the whole of the season. But one game, I have to say this one, because there's a little winger who plays at Perpignan called Pascal Beaumety, little redhead, about 5'7", 5'8", great guy. But we were out training with the backs. I was out with Philippe Carbonneau passing the ball, because we were trying to avoid the psych-up, obviously. We came back in, and it already got started, and we were all in the huddle, and I looked over at Pascal, and a massive cut on his head. Lawrence Senior had headbutted him. What a strange way to do it. But the French... This wasn't unique to Brive. In Béziers in the 1980s, who were French champions, they used to have a thing where they switched the lights off and on very fast, and apparently this strobe effect put everyone into a frenzy. And they were just off and on, and they went out and just smashed every team. And Stade Francais, under Bernard Laporte, one game they were all warming up outside, and he put the showers on full blast. It closed all the doors and the windows, and you couldn't see anything. He switched the lights off, all steam, and he said, right guys, free for all. And one of the players, Richard Poole-Jones, was knocked out, couldn't play the game. But they became champions, so it works for them.
It's quite funny, because I've got to watch your time, because we could speak for hours on end, and we're only about a quarter of the way through the amount of clubs that you played for.
Thanks,
But, let's quickly go on to, obviously, possibly the pinnacle of your career. Obviously, playing for your country is massive. But the Lions Test, South Africa, in some ways they call that the Lions Test series that actually just took the British Lions phenomenon, just shot it into the sky. And, great to be involved in that. And it just became a whole legendary experience, didn't it?
No, it was. It was a perfect time to be involved as well. It was 1997, and the game had been officially professional for a year or two, but we still had this amateur ethos of it, going on tour, enjoying it, and getting the most out there, not just the rugby. But it was also the first real professional tour where a lot of rugby league players would train for 3 hours each day, and we had to learn a lot about defence. We'd never trained defence before, and it was the most organised professional tour I've seen. The media, before we went out, there was hundreds camped at our hotel. And going to South Africa, world champions, we're under a lot of pressure, and the way we played, especially I really enjoyed the way we played before the test, because we moved the ball so much, and we scored a lot of tries and beat South Africa, all the best teams in South Africa, by outscoring and playing better rugby. And the two test matches, they were more defensive affairs, and we took our chances. And obviously Neil Jenkins helped us in the second test, but our discipline, our work rate, and our defence won us those games. But what a great experience. We had two coaches at the top of their game, and Jim and Geach, with the best ever captain and that I've ever had, Martin Johnson, who, but before then wasn't a captain. He wasn't even in the running for captain. It was either Keith Wood, Will Carling, Jason Leonard, Rob Wainwright was mentioned, but not Martin Johnson. He turned out to be a fantastic captain, a guy that led by example, and he was the main reason, I would say, more than Johnny Wilkinson, how England won the World Cup. But no, the more time goes on, being a Lion was special, but obviously winning with the Lions, especially after they've lost the last two series, it has become the proudest moment of my career.
Did you find that when you came back from that, it was actually hard to then get yourself going forward again? Obviously professionalism, and you're always professional in what you do, but coming from such a massive pinnacle to then coming back to normality, it must have been quite difficult, was it? It
was difficult, and you saw that in the 2005 Lions. There was a lot of Welsh players on that trip, and they won the Grand Slam in 2005, and I think they lost every game the following year. It is a big come down. It's an intense tour to put all that training, and then I think the tours last 2 months. And I'd had a strange experience after the Lions tour. We were talking about before. about how I really wanted to carry on my form and play at standoff. And I thought the only way I could do that is move to a club that wanted me to stand off. Northampton were quite happy with a relationship that I could play 13, and Paul Grayson, who was also in the Lions tour, played 10. So I'd gotten so well with Rob Howlett that I thought Cardiff, they were keen on signing me. I thought that'd be great. We're good friends, and the halfback partnership had went well. But Clive Woodward was coach of Bath, and he said, "Oh, we're keen for you at standoff." So I met both clubs in one day. And I didn't have an agent at the time. This was back in 97, so agents didn't really exist. Bath had went really well. Met Clive Woodward, Andy Robinson. Things had went well. But Andy Nichol, who was there, he said, "Oh, after all your meetings, I'll take you out and you can meet some of the players. And it'll be great. You can meet Jerry Guscott, chat with him, Phil de Glanville, Mike Catt, and we'll go out for a meal." But he didn't work out that Phil de Glanville, Mike Catt, and Jerry Guscott, I was going to be taking one of these guys' places if I joined in. And it was the quietest meal you've ever had. I was sitting there and Andy's going, "So Jerry, tell Gregor, it'll be great to join Bath." And he went, yeah, Bath's a really good club. So, Phil de Glanville, Mike Catt, you played standoff this year. Gregor wants to play standoff. Yeah, Northampton. I was sticking Northampton. So I left Bath to go into Cardiff. I did them both in one day, and I went to Cardiff. Rob Howley showed me around, and then Gareth Edwards, the nicest man you'll ever meet, really took me under his wing and said, taught me through all the history of Cardiff. And this is a guy that was voted the best ever rugby player in the history of the game. And I thought, this is the place to be. It just felt right. It felt like a real good club. So I said to him at the end of it, I said, "I'm going to go back to Northampton tonight and tell them I'm joining Cardiff. I think it'll be really good." There was a lot of problems between Welsh rugby then. Cardiff and Swansea had opted out of the Welsh Championship to play against English clubs, but I thought this will be great. And they want me to stand off. Rob Howley's there, Gareth Edwards. So I went back on the train. Ian McGeechan phones me and says, "Oh, we've heard you've been down at Cardiff today. Please come and meet us. We want to just have one last word with you." And went to meet Geach that night, and he said about how much he wants me to play standoff. And I did feel that I owed something to Geach because he'd picked me for the Lions. I ended up saying to Geach, "Okay, I'm going to stay. I think I like your plans and I agree with your thing." But I just realised then I'd said yes to 2 clubs. Things got worse when I got home. There was a message on my answer machine from Gareth Edwards, a legendary Gareth Edwards, and he said, "Gregor, we're over the moon you're coming to join us. Have a listen to this." In the background you could hear him passing the telephone over, and the whole 30 people cheering. It was all the Cardiff players cheering, and I'm going, oh, the embarrassment. I'm going to have to now turn down Gareth Edwards, the Cardiff players, but they were very nice about it. And if that is one regret I have, probably not going to Cardiff, because the Northampton season wasn't the best season, but it did make up my mind I had to leave, and I ended up going to France in the end.
You know, you're lucky in some ways because you had the amateur era, and I think you'd be one if you were ever to get involved again. It's trying to keep a balance between both, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I felt that the balances went too much in the preparation side of it, and having strict training regimes over the last few years. My last appearance for Scotland was in the World Cup in 2003. And I always remember our first match, we played Japan in Townsville. And we hadn't played that well, but we scored 5 tries, won the bonus point. Some of the guys were a bit down after the match, but it was only the older guys in the squad were saying, let's go out for a beer. Don't have to get drunk, but let's go out for a beer in Townsville, meet the supporters, have a relaxed time. We've been training so hard for it. And all the young guys said, no, we can't go out. We've got a video meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m, better have an early night. And that sums up to me that maybe priorities have changed, and it's not a healthy thing to be too intense and just thinking about the game and the training all the time. You
obviously were at Border Reivers, then got the chance to go and play Super 12 rugby, now Super 14, but Super 12 rugby with Natal Sharks. And you look at where you've all been and what you've done. You've played at the best championship in England. You've then gone to the best in France, and then you had the crack at the Super 12. Just an outstanding opportunity for you, one that you took well.
No, and for the Super 12, I have to thank Matt Williams, the guy who. I didn't want to thank him because he ended my Scotland career, but a couple of weeks after he ended my Scotland career, in fact, it was before I'd been contacted by the Sharks to go and play in the Super 12, but I had a contract here that I'd still a year and a half to run, and I wanted to carry on playing for Scotland. Yeah. But he didn't want me in the squad, and he made it clear. I kept saying I wanted to be available, but the killer blow was he said, okay, if you still want to be available, I'll put you in the squad, but don't come to any of the training sessions, which obviously that made up my decision that I wasn't going to be available, and I was so gutted for a couple of weeks. But then I found out the Sharks hadn't signed a player, and I thought, well, instead of staying here like a spare part and being, as I said before, a bit embarrassed by the whole situation, my ambition was one day to play Super 12. I thought I wouldn't be able to fulfill it, but I went out there, and it was a huge risk. Financially, it was a huge risk. Going to South Africa for just 6 months with a 1-year-old at the time, Christian, with Claire, my wife, was pregnant. It was a big risk, but it was one of my best experiences ever. The people were fantastic. Our average crowd was 35,000. The rugby was superb, and I wish I'd stayed a bit longer and another year, but they changed the rule about the foreigners. But to have had that 6 months was great. And I know I was talking to someone before about what the supporters thought of me out there, and I mentioned this in the book about how when I went before, I didn't realise when I went out there was a bit of controversy that the Sharks were signing a player that was I was 30-year-old at the time. It wasn't deemed good enough for Scotland. That's not good enough for South African rugby. But all the supporters were really good with me. And I remember my first week coming up to me on the beach and the family, welcome to Durban. And I thought, this is amazing. I wouldn't get recognised back in Gala, but here in the middle of nowhere, they loved their rugby. But there was one night I thought the supporters were maybe taking a bit too far, their love. I'd finished training, and there was these two Afrikaners who get called big Dutchmen, big gruff guys, always big and real strong Afrikaner accents. And we'd finished the training. I'd done a bit of kicking at the end and saw these two guys, and they were obviously drunk. And they said, "Oh, it's amazing you're here. We think you're the best kicker we've ever seen in the world." How drunk
were they?
You know that Castle Lager is quite strong, don't you?
Brutal.
And I said, "Oh, thanks very much, very kind. Well, my mum would have thought of the best kicker in the world." And I got talking a bit longer, and they said, "Oh, can we pose for a photo?" And yeah, sure. And I said, "Oh, we're down from Pretoria. We'll come down for the holidays here. We love the Sharks, even though we're up at Pretoria, up in Northern Transvaal." And they said, "Oh, your anthem is great as well. We love your anthem. But we think Flower of Scotland's a better anthem." And I went, "Oh, right, okay." But and I was like, "Oh, maybe they've got me confused with someone." And just at the end of it, they said, "Oh, cheers, Neil. Thanks, Neil." They thought it was Neil Jenkins. So after that, my nickname became Jenks at the club. So.
That's amazing, that because Neil's he's an ugly guy. Incredible, really. It was great because I remember we were out there with the Under-19s World Cup, and to see you come on, you usually came on about 25 minutes, half an hour to go, and did change the game, because obviously the old show and go, they hadn't seen it out there on the telly, and all the back rowers were flying off into the distance as you struck through the middle, and you played well out there. But I suppose in some ways the amount of contacts you must have around the world must be quite incredible now, and it'll be who's who, just about who will phone you, or will they all be getting a book?
Well, there's a few complaining about the books. The Scottish team, actually, some of the guys were texting me because I gave one to Chris Cassada, and then all these other guys are saying, "Where's my book? Why are you not getting one?" The boys that get paid the most in rugby can't go to a shop and buy one themselves. No, but you're right. I've been lucky. I had a phone call the other day from a guy I know well in France. So if anybody's wanting tickets for the World Cup final, I can get you them for €1,000 a pair. So that's a good deal. But the contacts you have in South Africa. It's tough in many ways. I did play for so many clubs, and you leave friends every time, and South Africa's a long place to go and see, and you can only keep in touch with them, email, by phones for so long. But I think rugby, the good thing about the game, that you make friends for life. And this year, with a few, Jim's been at one Lions anniversary lunches. It's 10 years since we won in South Africa, and those guys, some of those, especially the English and Welsh players, I haven't seen since 10 years ago. And it's like yesterday. You play with someone, you train with someone. I played with guys here 15, 20 years ago, and it's just like yesterday.
Great times with Scotland. Name some of the memories and the laughs you've had with that international side.
No, they were very good times. My first tour in Australia in 1992 was great. We did 2 years after winning the Grand Slam, so there were still some fantastic individuals there. David Soul was our captain, the Hastings brothers. Peter Dodds was the best player on the tour. Yeah, mine's a Magnus, Dodds. And it was a real old school tour. We used to play on a Tuesday. I was in the second team, and we used to play on a Tuesday night, and you would get drunk after the game on a Tuesday night. Then on a Friday night before the Saturday team played, it was encouraged, or it was obligatory, that you got drunk again. The manager used to pay for the night out, for the dip trackers, it was called, dip trackers, who went out and did the reconnaissance work on where all the good pubs were. So you're drunk on a Friday night, and then after the team played on a Saturday, you had drinking sessions, so drunk again a Saturday night. And now and again, I was taken out for a session on a Sunday night, so it was a good experience to be drunk 4 times a week, my first Scotland tour. But no, the mid-90s obviously were a good time for Scottish rugby. We had Grand Slam matches against England in 95, 96, and then with that freakish year in 99 where we won the championship, and that game against France has got to be the best game I've ever played in, or the best 20 minutes I've ever played in. We scored 5 tries in the first half against the French. And a game I don't think it'll ever be repeated. It was just one of these one-offs when we knew all our games, we were so confident, we were offloading, people were running onto the ball. And it was a pity it was the last game of the championship, because I think if we'd went on a tour that year, we might have been one of the Southern Hemisphere teams. But no, you have good times, you have bad times. I think when you finish your career, you forget the bad times. The times you're criticised, the times you lose form. When you're a player, those are the times that really affect you the most, because you do start to think that you're maybe not the player you thought you were, or you get affected by negativity. But now, after retirement, you have a more balanced view, and the good times are good to think back on.
After the Australian tour, you were flown back to Italy, because that was the glorious Students' World Cup of 92 when John Rutherford coached the students team at the World Cup along with Davy Bell, who was a trained killer and psychopath that we'll not mention. But it was tough, that, wasn't it, being called a Gala bastard for, I think it was close on a month.
Yeah. By 2 Selkirk people as well, can you believe it? Now I remember that Rad said to Carl Hogg and myself, had been on the Scotland tour, and we had a day off before flying out to the World Cup in Italy. And he said, "Now I know you guys have had a long season. You've just been on tour to Australia. Hoggy won his first cap out in Australia. But if you come to the World Cup, you'll be in the pool every day, relaxing. You'll just play one game in the group matches against France. We'll look after you." I looked back. Hoggy and me were the only 2 to play every single minute of every game. We got killed at training. The hotel was a shambles. But as we were chatting the other day, it was one of the best tours I've been on. It was, you don't need great facilities, you don't need to have easy lives. We trained hard, but we definitely bonded well on that trip.
We were made to sit at the front of the bus. Every single time we were on the bus, we were on the front in the kind of 2 monkey seats at the front, and the Rutherford man would sit on that one kind of jump seat just down as you walk off. And every single day we were on that bus, it would be just the team song, lads. If you hate the Gala, and the classic was, we actually went to a civic reception in Genoa in front of some of the top Italian dignitaries, and the Scottish team was asked to sing its tour song. And John Rutherford stood up and started to sing the old "If You Hate That," and I remember the top politician from Genoa was sitting next to me giving it. Who are these Gala bastards? Brilliant. So obviously Scotland, British Lions, and then back to the Border Reivers, wasn't it? It was like the full circle.
It was. I think that's one of the chapter headings. Well done.
Was it? You won't remember. I'll just say on every chapter there's obviously the headline, and then underneath that, Gregor's a great man for quotes, and there's some great quotes throughout the whole book on people that obviously have been an influence on you and whatever. I
used to have a quote when I was young: "If you've never made a mistake, you've never made a decision." So I always said I made plenty of decisions when I was young, because I made a lot of mistakes. No. It was 2002 when I first came back to the Borders, and I thought that was me home for good. And it was great to come back. Rob was there as coach. We were building something new, a team back in the Borders. And for those people that say that a professional rugby can't work here, go back to 2002 with crowds of up to 5,000. That was only after about 3 or 4 home games. And it was a pity in many ways that the Celtic League that year was split into 2 pools. And I think we only had 7 matches in our pool. We played 3 of them at other grounds in the Borders, which was a good thing. But then we played a couple at home, and then the season was over at Christmas. But the will was there, the people were behind it, and unfortunately ever since 2002 the funding went down. Obviously we know the history of it, and I did end up going, even though I thought that was me back for good. I ended up in France and South Africa before I came back for good in 2005, and had my last 2 years here, and it was good to finish playing there and to be settled here at my end of my career, and looking forward to the next bit of my life, which will be working for the Scottish Institute of Sport Foundation, so helping Scottish sport.
It was quite surreal, wasn't it? Because the last game was against the Ospreys, who'd been going well and obviously won the championship that night. So on one hand, you had a team celebrating with fireworks and ticker tape and whatever, and you had another side that it was the end of an era. And I remember standing at the top end with two men that you mentioned in your book, Al Christie and Riddle Graham, who had a big influence on you through the Boys Brigade, and all I could see was about 250 or 300 youngsters actually running about. And I thought that is actually what really kills the whole thing off. All these young players with a ball in their hands, kicking them about, really looking at some of the world's greatest players, because there's some crackers in both teams.
And those young guys, they don't know anything about the politics of Scottish rugby. They just see the fact that every couple of Fridays there was international players. They loved it, and I agree with you. I saw that in that last game. Yeah. But in many ways, I'm glad we lost that last game, because there was a celebratory atmosphere. The Ospreys had won. If we'd won, it would have been good for us, but it would have been flat. And we'd stuck in. We played well. Put them under pressure. They were the champions, and I think they had to kick a penalty in injury time to make sure of it. So it showed that competitiveness, we were up there. We didn't have the funding or the backing, but there was grounds for having a team here.
Thoughts for Scottish rugby in the future?
Well, I mentioned a lot in the last chapter about how we need to have a long-term vision and not just keep making short-term decisions, whether it's closing a team, having a team, bringing a coach, not having an academy, because you can't get support by that. If you're going to make professional rugby work, you've got to create identities of the teams and give them at least 4 years on their own to build up crowd, to do enough marketing, to get a bit of feeling, never mind get the players through. We were given, I think, 6 months at the Borders before they started chopping the budget. And I'm obviously a supporter of Borders rugby, and I would love a team here, but as a supporter of Scottish rugby, a third team is necessary somewhere in the country. If that means it's up in Dundee or Aberdeen, well, I think we need it, because having only two sides, already Glasgow have got a few foreigners in their team. Edinburgh, obviously, it's necessary to have a couple, but you could get a situation where there'll be one position, whether it's outside centre or tight head prop, there's no Scottish qualified player playing at professional level. And where is the academy systems underneath? I think one thing that has had a detrimental effect of growing the game. The only country in the Northern Hemisphere that hasn't grown the game in professional rugby is a lack of optimism. So I don't want to sit here and say, it's all doom and gloom and they've made all these many mistakes. I'd like to look forward and say, let's have an optimistic outlook. Let's build for the future. If it means we have to cut the budgets by £1 million to build a stadium for Edinburgh, build a stadium for Glasgow, build a stadium for here or up north, and say, right, for 4 years we're gonna struggle, but we're gonna have a team, we're gonna build it. So that's what they did in Ireland. I use an example of Newcastle. Ireland always say, Ireland are different because they've had success, but they didn't have success. 1999, they got knocked out of the World Cup in the pool stages, and they thought, we need to change our rugby. They had 200-300 people at their games at Leinster and Munster back then. The clubs were more important, or the more crowds went to the clubs than the professional teams. They've built success by looking at the long term. Then I look at Newcastle down the road, who have not had success. They're in a big football area. They're always down the bottom of the league. I went to a game last year, 2 games last year, sellouts both times. So it can work in areas which don't have rugby. This area has rugby. It just needs people all coming together rather than being sidelined and being against each other. That's what's happened the last few years.
Okay. Right, listen, we're going to have a question and answer now. The roving mic. So if anybody wants to ask Gregor a question, then put the hand up and we'll go for it. This is on the flex, so the further down the room I get, the bar gets closer to me, because I think it's linked to the bar as well. Anyway, a question for Gregor. Anybody? Hands up.
Pick on one of them.
The Selkirk table. Come on, lads. You've had a hot meal, electricity. What more do you want? An inside toilet, says that. A question, Dennis, on you go, fire away.
No, I'm just listening to what you're saying, Gregor. Finance is what we're missing. And where do you suggest that comes from?
Well, I agree with you, finance is missing to build things, and I think we made a lot of wrong decisions on finance. Like take the Borders, for example. We set up here and we had a temporary stand each year with temporary porta cabins for the sponsors. That costs money each year. If you're going to put some money into it, it'll be off the balance sheet if you build something. But I don't think finance is a be-all and end-all. If you look at Scottish football, one of the reasons they're doing so well is that they didn't get the TV contracts that the English Premier League had a few years ago, and they decided they can't afford these foreign players, so they have to develop their youth systems a bit more. And now Rangers have got 8 Scottish players in their squad, most of them playing. Celtic got a lot of young Scottish players. The best talent has been able to come through now, because if you give organisations and teams money, sometimes they don't develop their own, sometimes they go and sign foreigners. So the better use of money is the best way. But I don't think finance is the only thing. I think we have to focus on building our own game and growing it and taking a lesson from football. Both Rangers Celtic won this week. Scotland football team are doing great. And you wouldn't have said that a few years ago when Rangers Celtic probably had better teams and more foreigners. Now they've got their coaching and development right, and it's working for them.
Gregor, looking at as the World Cup's going, it looks like the Six Nations way behind the Southern Hemisphere. What do you think we can do to try get back up sides with them? They seem to be they play a game far different to us, either far faster, far more skillful. What do you think you can do to help with that?
It's true that the Southern Hemisphere teams, they're focused on where is the space on a rugby field, and that doesn't have to be about passing the ball all the time. Their use of the kicking game is much more intelligent and creative than the Northern Hemisphere teams. We seem to kick when the ball is slow and we need to kick, whereas Dan Carter will kick off first phase because the opposite team have came up in a blitz and there's space in behind. Scrum halves, Fury Dupree from South Africa was chipping the ball in behind. And that's what the New Zealand game plan is about. It's if there's space anywhere in the field, they're going to try and exploit it, whether that's on their own 22 or kicking it in the opposition 22. Then they've got a different culture, and we need to change that. You need the players there, but the players are there. From a Scotland point of view, I think we've got a lot of talent in the team. We've probably maybe put ourselves under a lot of pressure to win certain games and just do everything but winning, rather than saying, let's develop a style of play that will get us wins next year or the year after, but at least it's creating tries. Because the one good thing about this World Cup, and the good thing about rugby in general, is that the best team will be winning by scoring tries. Best team in the world just now, New Zealand, attack you from everywhere. They put you under a lot of pressure on defence, but they don't play boring rugby. They attack, which means that that's still the way to win rugby games.
I've ventured across to the table here where your old mentor, Peter Dodds, is here. Now sporting the same hairdo as you, by the way. It's amazing the influence you've had on the old boys, Gregor. Doddsy.
Sorry about this, Gregor, but I heard a story about you last week. No, I'll keep it quiet, No, but seriously, Greg, I think nothing's been mentioned about sevens. You were a star in the sevens when you played up here. Had many a happy time. Do you think there's still a place in rugby for sevens now?
Absolutely. I think, especially the way the sevens has evolved, the sevens that we used to play, it was really enjoyable, but it lacked a physical edge, probably because the game was amateur. Now the sevens is so physical. You learn skills like winning the ball in contact, rucking, how to offload, that certain players would never get a chance in a game. You watch that game last week, Simon Webster had no passes the whole 80 minutes and he was outside centre. Now in sevens, you're going to get these opportunities, and I hope Scotland put more of an emphasis on it, because players have came through that environment, and the fact that these 10 tournaments a year, you're playing in front of 30,000, 40,000 people, so they're playing at a much higher level than they would be anyway. David Strettle, Matthew Tate, there's a lot of good guys came through the sevens, and as a back more than anything, probably back rows and backs will learn many more skills than they would given a chance to play 15s.
Gregor, you're on about sevens. In the Scottish sevens now, they're playing a lot of young lads. I agree with that, but do you not think the likes, say, Chris Patterson and them could have improved their game to a certain extent with playing more sevens international ways? They
could, but it'd be very hard for their coaches of their size to say we're going to give them up for a few weeks because they're so crucial to their 15 sides. But no, it'd be good to have a month in a year where players get to play sevens and learn different skills, and hopefully coaches will be using it more at training. But I don't think it'll ever happen. I think it is good that the young guys get to play there just now, and especially the ones that maybe aren't playing week in, week out at 15s. But no, it would be an interesting way, especially if we're trying to develop this attacking game plan that I mentioned before. Let's let them play sevens for a couple of tournaments.
Jim Telfer. Jim.
Gregor, you're Scotland coach for the day, Sunday. Tell me how you think you should beat the Argentinian team.
It's very tough because the Scotland players most of them will never have played under the pressure that Argentina will put on them. It reminds me very much of New Zealand against France last year, when the way they defended and chased every ball. The French got deeper and deeper, and by the end of it they were scared to take on the All Blacks. And Argentina have defended like that so far in this tournament. I think Scotland have to try and play some sort of continuity rugby. They have to try and pass out the tackle or before the tackle, because the Argentinians tackle so low that you go to deck really quickly, and the Irish couldn't handle that, the French couldn't handle it, and they ended up throwing the ball back from ruck situation because they'd never been tackled as hard. So our boys have to be confident to bump and pop, keep the ball alive, and not get this situation where Argentina can have a set phase where they can come up quick in defence. That's what the All Blacks love, is a ruck. The All Blacks go about a yard behind the ruck to get even more acceleration up. So I don't think that we have the creative players, especially in the midfield, that will beat that defence. We'll probably have to try and play as many lineouts as we can. I think that's one area we've got an advantage in the set piece. We don't have an advantage in the scrum. The kicking game will have to be at a real high level, because you don't want to give possession up to this team because they've got a very good pack. But they have to keep in the game. The one thing, it's not so much game plan, but the Argentinians aren't used to playing quarterfinals of World Cup. I think this is their second one ever. They're not used to being favourites. So if we're always in the game and we're really disciplined, our defence has to be solid. And if Chris is obviously getting opportunities to kick goals, which he will, then we've got a chance. But there's not one dream game plan that we can do. I'd love if we went there with a positive attitude and say to the back three, now there's going to be a lot of kicking. Try and run as much as you can. Rory Lamont, who's playing really well, Sean Lamont and Chris, because that's the only opportunity you'll get of good ball. But it's going to be very tough, I think.
Answer your question, Jim.
As he was leaving here at 3 o'clock in the morning after the last Borders game against the Ospreys, you think he had a tear in your eye and thought, as he was driving along in the taxi, he thought, maybe I could squeeze another couple of years playing club rugby out of this. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are now. Probably that would depend if Richie and Gary Parker would have played in the centre or not.
Did Rich set you up for this question? Every week Rich has asked me when I'm coming down to training. No, I did. I know what you're on about. I think I've lost the hunger to play at the highest level. I still obviously love the game and would love to be out doing training sessions, maybe with the vets more than with the Gala team, because it's a big commitment, and I can't commit to the whole season, so it's not fair just to come down for the odd game.
Obviously, staying down in St Boswell's now, you've got two young boys. They'll probably grow up, could well take on the mantle of rugby player as well. Which team are you going to get them to play for?
Well, I have to say there's no rugby for P1s and P2s in Gala, so they're at a club a few miles away from St Boswell's just now. But I was saying to Christian that as soon as he gets old enough, he won't be playing for Melrose. But I think it might be a tough one.
If you were to sum yourself up and how you would want to be remembered as a player.
That's a tough one.
Of course it's tough. I've been thinking a long time about this, I tell you.
I don't know, someone that tried things, tried to get the best out of his game, wasn't afraid to take on new challenges, played with a smile on his face maybe.
Okay, well, there's 17 chapters in Toony's book. It's an excellent read, and I've read a lot of rugby autobiographies in my time, and I thought I would write chapter 18 for you. I've even done it in the same script. And
you've got a quote as well.
It's called Toony's Last Stand, and the quote underneath it is just "Bra lads, Gala," right? And I've written it as Gregor would write it in his book. One last twist was to add itself to my colourful rugby career, and as I look back now, it was one challenge I am glad I accepted. Know what's coming? It would be the seed that was sown on the 5th of October 2007 at my book launch in the Gala RFC club rooms. The club where it had all started for me way back in 1980, when I had first appeared on the wing as an excited 17-year-old in my brother's victorious interward sports team. The club where my first international cap photo takes pride of place above the main bar. The club where my old international jerseys hang. The club that started off the incredible rugby journey that I'd been involved in throughout my life. Ironically, the idea would come from Richie Gray, the Gala forwards coach. who had played in the Gala team the day I made my debut at Stirling County. His brother had been a teammate through my Gala Academy and Gala Wanderers days, and his father, Johnny, had coached me in my teens along with Arthur Hovis Brown at the Wanderers. Gray said that although I had played my last game for the Borders on the 12th of May 2007, it was a travesty that I could not run onto Netherdale one last time with the famous maroon jersey on my back, in front of the town supporters that had followed every kick, pass, break and try, the highs and the lows throughout my career. Individual supporters that had had a huge impact on shaping the person and the character I am today. It just had to happen, and I will not take no as an answer, said Gray. Gray's plan would be as long as I trained through the month of March, I would be named in the squad for the club's last league game of the season at home against Ellen on the 29th of March 2008, and would come off the bench with 20 minutes to go. He had run it past the players at the club and everyone wanted to see it happen. Gray told me to phone him the following morning between 10 a.m. and 12 noon with my decision, as he did not want to put pressure on me having to give an answer at the club in front of 150 people that lunchtime. Gray also said to me that if I said no to his request, that he and two other Gala henchmen, namely Alan Jobby Johnson and Mark Bally Ballantyne, would come to my house on a dark night in December with a car battery and two jump leads from Stuart Townsend's, attach them to my testicles. I then knew that there could only be one answer. Saturday the 29th of March will be a memory that will stay with me forever. A beautiful spring day in Gala Shields. There was not a cloud in the sky, and the Netherdale pitch looked like a bowling green. The club had promoted the fact that I was playing for a fortnight before the game. It was billed as Toony's last stand. In my career, I had played at the world's greatest stadiums, but nothing compared to that day, when almost 3,000 Gala supporters turned up, bedecked in anything maroon, to support the Gala team and give me a final send-off. To be back in the Gala dressing room that day brought back the memories of a great career. Where better to finally bring the curtain down than at my true home club. I came on in the last 20 minutes to a cheer that could have been heard around the country and settled in the position that I had enjoyed playing more than any other in my career. I managed to put every skill I had together in that 20 minutes, a couple of passes, a couple of breaks, 3 kicks, even a tackle. And then, as if it was meant to be, from a scrum just inside our half, it went through 2 phases. I spotted a gap and went for it. The gap closed, and as I was met by 2 defenders, I managed to go through and offload with the trademark Toony flip. And on my shoulder, instead of Gavin Hastings, as on that beautiful day in Paris, Gala prop Alan Johnston, a player that had been a teammate of mine at the Gala Wanderers all those years ago, was there to run the 15 metres to the try line. As Bra Bra Lads was being played over the tannoy at the end of the game, and the whole ground, including players and supporters, were singing, I could not have written the script better myself. The game finished, and this in turn was the perfect end to my career, where it had all started those many, many years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, if Gregor Townsend was a footballer and had played in all the clubs that we've discussed and had played in all the leagues around the world, he would be up there in legend status for the rest of his life. But in some ways it's quite humbling when you're sitting here, and I was standing at the back of the hall where he first started out there as a 7-year-old in Netherdale playing fields with your brother's team, to be sitting here in front of people that have followed your career and possibly are the true supporters of Gregor Townsend. It's a pleasure to have spoken to you, and all the very best for the future, Greg.
Thank you very much.